Millionaire didn't know he had a son until he saw a humble mother begging with twin boys identical to him. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Now, get ready for an emotional story. The autumn wind swept through the nearly empty park, scattering golden leaves across the cobblestone path where Joseph Blackwood walked alone. His tailored overcoat and polished shoes spoke of wealth, but his eyes, those piercing blue eyes, held a sorrow that no fortune could erase. 5 years to the day since he'd lost Jennifer. 5 years since the light had gone out in his world. Joseph clutched a bouquet of white lilies, Jennifer's favorite, as he made his way to the cemetery. He'd become a different man since her passing, colder, more calculated. The young, passionate businessman had been replaced by a hard-edged CEO whose name now adorned skyscrapers across the city. "Flowers, sir? Fresh roses for your sweetheart?" He barely registered the female vendor's voice as he passed a small flower stand near the park's edge. Something made him pause, though, perhaps a fleeting desire to add roses to his ritual offering. "I'll take a dozen red—" The words died on his lips as he turned toward the voice. Time stopped. The world around him faded to a blur. Standing before him, older and thinner than he remembered, but unmistakable with those soft brown eyes and the small birthmark near her left eyebrow, was Jennifer. His Jennifer, his dead wife. "Joseph?" Her voice came as a whisper, the flower basket slipping from her hands, roses spilling across the pavement like drops of blood. "Daddy! It's him, Mommy! It's him!" Two small voices pierced the silence. A boy and a girl, perhaps 5 years old, identical faces with his blue eyes and Jennifer's delicate features, emerged from behind the flower stand. Joseph staggered backward, his mind unable to process what his eyes were seeing. Jennifer, alive, and children. Twins who called her mother and looked at him with his own eyes. "This isn't possible," he managed, his voice hoarse with shock. "You died. I buried you." Jennifer's face had drained of color. "Your mother," she whispered, tears now streaming down her pale cheeks. "Eleanor told me you'd moved on, that you didn't want—" "Eleanor?" The name of his mother sparked a flare of confusion, then slowly dawning comprehension. A cold, calculating woman who had never approved of his common wife. The little girl stepped forward, her small hand reaching toward him with innocent curiosity. "Are you really our daddy? Mommy has your picture." Joseph felt the world tilting beneath his feet. 5 years of grief. 5 years of building walls around his broken heart. And now this. A family he never knew existed. A wife returned from the dead, and the dawning realization that it had all been a lie. "Jennifer," he breathed, reaching out a trembling hand toward her face, needing to know she was real. "How is this possible?" Jennifer struggled to maintain her balance as she stared at Joseph, the man she had mourned while he was still alive. The twins, Noah and Olivia, looked between their mother and the stranger who was supposedly their father, confusion painted across their identical faces. "We can't talk here," Jennifer whispered, noticing the small crowd forming around them. The wealthy CEO of Blackwood Technologies was easily recognizable, and their emotional encounter was drawing unwanted attention. Joseph nodded, his business instincts kicking in despite his shock. "There's a cafe around the corner." His voice was mechanical, as if operating on autopilot while his mind raced to process this impossible reality. 20 minutes later, they sat in a quiet corner booth. The twins colored on paper placemats while Joseph and Jennifer faced each other across the table, 5 years of separation stretching between them like an ocean. "Eleanor told me you were moving on with Catherine Prescott," Jennifer began, her fingers nervously shredding a napkin. "She showed me photos of you two together at charity events. She said it would be better for everyone if I just disappeared." Joseph's knuckles whitened as he gripped his untouched coffee cup. "My mother sent you away when you were pregnant?" 3 months along. She arranged a family visit to England. Said it was a gift from you." Jennifer's voice grew bitter. "When I arrived, she took my passport, my phone, everything, left me with barely enough money for a week and vanished. And you believed I knew about this?" Anger flashed in Joseph's eyes. At first, no. I tried contacting you, but every number was disconnected. Then I saw the obituary. Jennifer wiped a tear. My own death, Joseph. With you quoted saying how you'd never recover from the loss of your beloved wife. Olivia tugged at her mother's sleeve. Mommy, I'm hungry. Joseph immediately signaled the waitress, ordering food for the children without hesitation. This small act of paternal instinct surprised him as much as Jennifer. How did you get back to America? He asked when the waitress left. It took me years to save enough for passage and fake documents. By then, the twins were 4. Jennifer glanced at the children. When we finally returned, I saw you with her, Catherine, at the opening of your new headquarters building. You looked happy. Joseph leaned forward. I was never happy, Jennifer. I've spent 5 years building an empire to fill the hole you left. And now? Jennifer's question hung between them. Before he could answer, Joseph's phone buzzed. Catherine's name flashed on the screen. He silenced it without a second thought. I need proof, he said finally. A DNA test for the children. Pain flickered across Jennifer's face, but she nodded. Of course, they're yours, Joseph. They have your eyes, your stubbornness. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Noah even furrows his brow exactly like you when he's concentrating. Joseph glanced at the boy, who was indeed furrowing his brow over a particularly challenging section of his coloring page. Something deep within him recognized the truth even before science could confirm it. What happens next? Jennifer asked softly. Depends entirely on you. The DNA results came back with undeniable certainty. Noah and Olivia were indeed Joseph's biological children. Now seated in his expansive corner office on the 52nd floor of Blackwood Tower, Joseph stared at the official documents while his mind tumbled through a storm of emotions. Mr. Blackwood, his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Ms. Prescott is calling again, 3rd time today. Tell her I'm in meetings all afternoon, Joseph replied, his voice distant. He couldn't deal with Catherine now, not when his entire reality had been upended. He opened his desk drawer and retrieved a small silver frame he'd hidden away years ago. Jennifer's smile gazed back at him from their wedding photo. She'd been so young then, just 23, her art degree, newly framed, her eyes full of dreams. He'd been 25, ambitious but still idealistic, before grief hardened him into the ruthless businessman he'd become. His phone buzzed with a message from Jennifer. The twins keep asking when they'll see you again. Joseph ran a hand through his immaculately styled hair. How had his mother orchestrated something so monstrous? Separating a pregnant woman from her husband, fabricating a death, allowing him to grieve for 5 years while his children grew up without him. The sound of the office door flying open jolted him from his thoughts. Joseph, enough of this nonsense. Catherine Prescott stood in the doorway, elegant in designer wear, her father's influence as a major shareholder apparently sufficient to bypass his assistant. There are rumors all over town. Something about your dead wife miraculously returning. With children? Joseph didn't rise from his chair. They're not rumors, Catherine, her perfectly composed face faltered. What exactly are you saying? Jennifer is alive. My mother sent her away when she was pregnant and faked her death. He held up the DNA results. I have twins, a son and daughter. Catherine's laugh was brittle. This is absurd. Some woman shows up claiming to be Jennifer with children in tow and you believe her? Have you lost your mind? The DNA confirms it, Joseph replied evenly. Catherine's eyes narrowed as realization dawned. So what does this mean for us? For our engagement? The merger with my father's company that's supposed to be announced next month? Joseph finally stood, feeling the weight of this impossible choice. His carefully reconstructed life, the billion-dollar empire he'd built, the strategic alliance with the Prescott family, the armor he'd fashioned around his heart, all of it threatened by the truth. I don't know yet, he admitted. But they're my family, Catherine. Her eyes flashed dangerously. Choose carefully, Joseph. My father can pull his support from the Asian expansion project. The board already has concerns about your judgment. She stepped closer. Is this ghost from your past worth losing everything you've built? As Catherine stormed out, Joseph turned to the window overlooking the city. Somewhere down there, in a modest apartment he'd arranged, Jennifer was rebuilding a life with their children. His children. 5 years ago, he would have chosen love without hesitation. But he wasn't that man anymore. The question now was whether he could find his way back to him. The glass walls of Joseph's office offered a panoramic view of the city, but his attention was fixed on the manila folder on his desk. Inside lay the irrefutable proof. Noah and Olivia Blackwood were his biological children. The lab had expedited the results, confirming what his heart already knew from the moment he'd looked into their familiar blue eyes. Cancel my appointments. For the rest of the day, Joseph instructed his assistant through the intercom, and schedule a meeting with Davis from legal tomorrow morning. First thing. He needed to understand the implications. Jennifer Blackwood was still legally his wife. Her death had been fabricated. The prenuptial agreement his mother had insisted upon was rendered meaningless by the fraud. And what of Catherine? The engagement ring he'd given her 6 months ago suddenly felt like a betrayal to the family he never knew he had. Joseph's phone buzzed with another message from Catherine. Her patience was wearing thin, demanding answers he wasn't ready to give. The merger with Prescott Industries hinged on their marriage, a business arrangement dressed up as romance that had served both families' interests. Until now. He opened his desk drawer and withdrew a worn leather journal. Inside, pressed between the pages, was the last photograph taken of Jennifer before her death. Her smile, once a source of unbearable pain, now awakened something he'd thought long buried. Mr. Blackwood, his assistant's voice interrupted. There's a Ms. Eleanor Blackwood on line 1. She says it's urgent. His mother. Of course she would have heard by now. Her network of society spies would have reported Jennifer's reappearance within hours. Tell her I'm unavailable, Joseph replied, his tone hardening. Indefinitely. He picked up his personal phone instead and dialed the number he'd given Jennifer for the temporary apartment. Hello? Her voice was cautious, as if still uncertain of his intentions. The test confirmed what we already knew, Joseph said simply. I'd like to see the children again, properly this time. The silence from Jennifer's end stretched for several seconds. They have school until 3. Come by after? Joseph agreed, ending the call before his emotions could betray him. 5 years of grief had taught him to compartmentalize, to lock away vulnerability. But the walls he'd built were crumbling faster than he could reinforce them. As he gathered his coat and briefcase, his gaze fell on the framed magazine cover hanging near his office door, Forbes's Businessman of the Year, featuring his stern profile against the Manhattan skyline. The caption read, Joseph Blackwood, Building an Empire from Tragedy. How hollow that empire felt now, knowing what it had cost him. 5 years with his children. 5 years with the woman he had once pledged his life to. And yet that empire represented power. Power he might need to protect them all from whatever his mother might do next. Eleanor Blackwood had already proven she would stop at nothing to shape the future of the Blackwood legacy according to her vision. The car is waiting, Mr. Blackwood, his assistant informed him as he stepped into the reception area. Joseph nodded, straightening his tie. Thank you, Diane. And if my mother calls again, tell her my attorney will be in touch. It was time to meet his children. Not as the confused stranger in a cafe, but as their father. The modest apartment Joseph had arranged for Jennifer and the twins was a far cry from his penthouse or the mansion where they'd once lived as newlyweds. He knocked on the door, clutching a gift bag containing carefully chosen presents for Noah and Olivia, books and puzzles that might help him connect with children he barely knew. The door swung open to reveal Jennifer, her hair pulled back in, a simple ponytail, dressed in jeans and a sweater that had seen better days. For a moment they simply looked at each other, the weight of 5 lost years hanging between them. They're excited to see you, she said softly, stepping aside to let him enter. The twins sat at a small table coloring with mismatched crayons. They looked up in unison as he entered, their identical blue eyes. His eyes, studying him with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "Hello," Joseph said, immediately feeling foolish at the formality in his voice. How did one address children they had unknowingly abandoned? Olivia, bolder than her brother, spoke first. "Are you really going to be our daddy now?" The question struck him like a physical blow. "I've always been your father," he managed. "I just didn't know it until now." Noah remained silent, watching Joseph with an intensity that reminded him of his own reflection in childhood photographs. Joseph set down the gift bag and knelt to their level, remembering too late that his bespoke suit wasn't designed for such positions. "I brought you something." The children's delight at the gifts momentarily bridged the awkwardness, and Joseph found himself sitting cross-legged on the floor, helping Noah assemble a complex puzzle while Olivia chattered about her favorite books. It felt surreal, this glimpse of a life he should have had all along. Later, with the twins occupied in their bedroom, Joseph and Jennifer sat at the kitchen table, an uncomfortable silence between them. "They're extraordinary," Joseph finally said. "You've done an amazing job raising them." Jennifer's smile was tinged with sadness. "It wasn't easy, but they gave me a reason to keep going." She hesitated. "Joseph, what happens now? With your mother? With your fiancé?" Before he could answer, his phone rang. Catherine's name flashed on the screen, the third call that hour. "You should take it," Jennifer said quietly. Joseph stepped into the hallway, steeling himself for the confrontation. "Catherine, emergency board meeting, Joseph, tomorrow morning." Catherine's voice was ice. "Your mother has informed the directors about your family situation. Richard Prescott is questioning your stability and fitness to lead the company." Joseph closed his eyes, the pieces falling into place. His mother and future father-in-law allied against him. "I'll be there." "One more thing," Catherine added. "You need to decide where your priorities lie. Your position as CEO, our engagement, the merger, or this, distraction from your past." After ending the call, Joseph returned to find Jennifer at the window, arms wrapped around herself. "They're going to take everything from you, aren't they?" she asked softly. Joseph looked past her to where the twins played, blissfully unaware of the storm gathering around their newly discovered father. "Not everything," he replied, making his first real decision since Jennifer's return. "Not what matters most." The morning sun streamed through the apartment windows as Joseph sat awkwardly at the small kitchen table. He'd arrived early before. The twins woke up to discuss strategy with Jennifer before the board meeting. Instead, he found himself attempting to prepare breakfast, a skill the billionaire CEO had rarely practiced. "You're burning the toast," Jennifer observed, entering the kitchen in a robe, her hair still tousled from sleep. There was something painfully familiar about the scene, reminiscent of their early marriage when they'd lived in a modest apartment. Near the university, Joseph frowned at the smoking toaster. "I can run a multinational corporation, but apparently basic cooking eludes me." Jennifer's quiet laugh surprised them both. She stepped forward, unplugging the toaster and salvaging what she could. Some things never change. Before Joseph could respond, excited footsteps thundered down the hallway. "Is that Daddy?" Olivia's voice called out, seconds before she burst into the kitchen, Noah trailing cautiously behind. The word Daddy struck Joseph with unexpected force. He'd been Mr. Blackwood for so long, feared, respected, but rarely loved. Now this? Small girl with his eyes and Jennifer's smile regarded him with pure, uncomplicated affection. "Good morning," he managed, feeling strangely vulnerable in his casual weekend attire. Designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that cost more than most people's monthly rent, yet seemed inadequate for the occasion. Breakfast became an impromptu lesson in family dynamics. Noah, methodical and observant, meticulously spread peanut butter on his salvaged toast. Olivia peppered Joseph with questions about his life, his work, his home. "Do you have a swimming pool? Do you have a dog? Can we see your big office?" Joseph found himself smiling despite the looming board meeting. "Perhaps we could visit the office next weekend," he suggested, glancing at Jennifer for approval. "First things first," Jennifer reminded him gently. "You need to secure your position there." Joseph nodded, the weight of his dual worlds pressing down once more. In 3 hours, he would face his mother, Catherine, and the board. People who had been his allies and family for 5 years. Now he would confront them as adversaries to protect his newly discovered true family. After breakfast, Joseph surprised himself by suggesting they go to the park before he had to leave. Noah brought a model airplane Joseph had gifted him, while Olivia insisted on bringing her favorite storybook. At the park, Joseph found himself running alongside Noah, helping the small plane soar through the autumn air. Later, he sat beside Olivia on a bench, awkwardly reading aloud from her well-worn book, conscious of Jennifer watching from a distance. "You're doing the voices wrong," Olivia critiqued, showing him how each character should sound. Joseph, who regularly negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, felt inexplicably nervous about meeting the standards of a 5-year-old. By the time they returned to the apartment, Joseph's designer watch warned him that he had barely 30 minutes to return home, change, and reach Blackwood Tower for the meeting that would determine his future. As he prepared to leave, Noah approached, offering his prized airplane as a talisman. "For good luck," the boy said softly, his first unprompted words to his father. Joseph knelt, looking into eyes so much like his own. "I'll bring it back safely," he promised, the weight of the plastic toy somehow more significant than any contract he'd ever signed. The towering glass and steel of Blackwood Tower gleamed in the morning sunlight as Joseph strode through the lobby, nodding curtly to employees who scrambled out of his path. Gone was the man who had sat cross-legged on an apartment floor helping his son with a puzzle. In his place walked Joseph Blackwood, CEO, his bespoke suit armor against the battle ahead. The elevator whisked him to the executive floor where his assistant waited with a worried expression. "They're already assembled in the boardroom," she said, handing him a tablet. "And your mother arrived early to speak with the board members privately." Joseph nodded, unsurprised. Eleanor Blackwood had always excelled at manipulating situations to her advantage. "Thank you, Diane. Hold all calls." As he approached the boardroom, he heard Catherine's voice through the partially open door. Clearly not in his right mind. "This woman could be anyone. We need to protect the company from his impulsive decisions." Joseph pushed open the door, silencing the room. 12 board members sat around the massive table, with Catherine standing at one end beside a presentation screen. At the opposite end sat Eleanor Blackwood, regal in her designer suit, her silver hair immaculately styled, her eyes, so like his own, cold and calculating. "Joseph," his mother greeted him with practiced warmth. "We were just discussing the unusual situation that's developed." "You mean the fraudulent death certificate you arranged for my wife?" Joseph replied evenly, taking his seat at the head of the table. "Or perhaps the illegal transportation of a pregnant woman across international borders against her will. Those situations, Mother." Eleanor's smile didn't waver. "These wild accusations are precisely what concerns us, Joseph. This woman appears after 5 years with children she claims are yours, and suddenly you're making outlandish claims against your own family." Joseph removed a folder from his briefcase. "DNA tests confirm the twins are my biological children." He slid copies across the table. "And I have recordings of transactions between Eleanor Blackwood and various parties who assisted in Jennifer's removal to England and the falsification of her death." A murmur ran through the board members. Richard Prescott, Catherine's father, leaned forward with a scowl. "Even if these allegations have merit, which I doubt, your recent behavior raises serious concerns about your judgment. The Asian expansion requires a leader with a clear head, not someone distracted by domestic complications." Catherine stood beside her father, her expression a mixture of anger and calculated concern. "Joseph, we're worried about you. This woman has clearly manipulated you. Enough." Joseph's voice cut through the room. The facts are simple. My mother arranged for my pregnant wife to be removed from the country, and her death to be faked. For 5 years I've been deprived of my family. For 5 years I've dedicated myself to this company, building it into what it is today. He looked directly at Eleanor, whose composed facade was beginning to crack. I have 2 children I've never known. A wife I thought was dead, and now I find that the person responsible for this theft of years, of memories, is my own mother. Eleanor's voice remained steady, though her hands betrayed a slight tremor. Everything I've ever done has been for this family's legacy, Joseph. That girl was never worthy of the Blackwood name. That girl is my wife, the mother of my children, and legally still Mrs. Blackwood. Joseph turned to address the entire board. I have no intention of stepping down as CEO. The Asian expansion will proceed as planned. But the merger with Prescott Industries is now off the table. Richard Prescott slammed his hand on the table. You can't be serious. That merger has been in development for over a year. It was contingent on my marriage to Catherine, Joseph replied coolly. A marriage that legally cannot proceed given that my wife is very much alive. Catherine's face flushed with rage. This is absurd. You would throw away everything for some woman from your past? Joseph stood, buttoning his jacket in a gesture that signaled the end of the discussion. Not some woman, Catherine. My family. He gathered his materials, addressing the board one final time. I suggest you all consider your positions carefully. The person who orchestrated fraud, kidnapping, and document falsification sits among you. Ask yourselves whose judgment is truly impaired. As he left the boardroom, Joseph felt lighter than he had in years, despite knowing that the real battle was just beginning. Eleanor Blackwood would not relinquish control easily, nor would the Prescotts abandon their ambitions without a fight. But for the first time since Jennifer's death, Joseph felt something long dormant awakening within him. Hope. Eleanor Blackwood's estate sprawled across 5 acres of manicured grounds at the edge of the city, a monument to old money and calculated ambition. Joseph had grown up in these halls, surrounded by wealth and expectations. Now, as his car rolled up the curved driveway, he felt like a stranger. He declined the butler's offer to announce him, striding directly to the sunroom where he knew his mother would be taking her afternoon tea. Some habits never changed, Eleanor's rigid schedule being chief among them. Joseph? Eleanor looked up from her porcelain cup, unsurprised. I was wondering when you'd come. At 72, she remained striking, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her posture regal despite the years. The family resemblance was undeniable. The same blue eyes, though hers had long ago frosted over with calculation. How could you do it? Joseph remained standing, unwilling to play the role of dutiful son. She was pregnant with your grandchildren. Eleanor sipped her tea calmly. Please spare me the dramatics. I did what any mother would do to protect her son from a catastrophic mistake. A mistake? Joseph's voice rose despite his efforts to remain composed. Jennifer was my wife, a penniless art student you met in college. Eleanor set down her cup with a sharp clink. She contributed nothing to this family's legacy or future. The Blackwood name means something in this city. Our family built this city. Did you honestly believe I would allow our bloodline to be diluted by some gold digger who caught your eye with a pretty smile? Joseph's hands clenched at his sides. She never wanted my money, unlike Catherine, whose father has been eyeing Blackwood Technologies since before you arranged our introduction. Eleanor's laugh was brittle. At least Catherine understands our world. She would have been a suitable partner, strengthening our position. Now you've thrown away a strategic alliance for sentiment. For family, Joseph corrected her. My children, Mother. Your grandchildren. Have you even seen a photo of them? Noah has my eyes, my expressions. Olivia has Jennifer's laugh, but my stubborn determination. Something flickered across Eleanor's face, perhaps the first genuine emotion he'd seen from her in years. But it vanished quickly behind her practiced mask. Children can be provided for without disrupting one's life, she said dismissively. A trust fund, good schools. That's not being a father. Joseph cut her off. That's what your father did to you. What you and father did to me. I won't continue that legacy of distant parenting and emotional detachment. Eleanor rose, her voice hardening. Don't be naive, Joseph. You've built an empire. Do you truly believe you can suddenly become a doting father? That you can juggle board meetings and bedtime stories? That woman has filled your head with sentimental nonsense. That woman, Joseph replied evenly, is still legally my wife, and I intend to be a husband and father, something this family has apparently forgotten how to do. Eleanor moved to the window, gazing out at the grounds. I can still destroy her, you know. One call to the immigration authorities about her fraudulent re-entry to the country. Don't threaten me, Mother. Joseph's voice was dangerously quiet. Every step you took to separate us left a trail. Bank transfers, falsified documents, bribed officials. I've spent the past week uncovering it all. Move against Jennifer or my children, and I'll ensure the Blackwood name is remembered not for building this city, but for corruption and fraud. As he turned to leave, Eleanor called after him. You're making a terrible mistake, Joseph. No, he answered without looking back. I'm finally correcting one. The story of Joseph Blackwood's resurrected wife and secret children exploded across social media within hours of the board meeting. Reporters camped outside Jennifer's apartment building. Photographers with telephoto lenses attempted to capture images of the twins, and tabloids published increasingly outlandish theories about what had really happened 5 years ago. We can't. Stay here, Joseph said, watching from the window as another news van pulled up. He had barely managed to enter the building through the service entrance, evading the press corps that had staked out the main lobby. Jennifer nodded, gathering the twins' scattered toys. They followed us to school yesterday. The principal had to call security. Joseph turned from the window, his decision already made. I have a place in the mountains, 3 hours north, completely private. The press doesn't know about it. I bought it through a shell corporation after I thought I'd lost you. Noah looked up from his book, eyes serious beyond his years. Will we have to change schools again? The question twisted something in Joseph's chest. How many times had Jennifer been forced to uproot their children, always just a step ahead of poverty? How many schools, apartments, jobs had they cycled through while he lived in luxury, believing himself a widower? Just temporarily, Joseph assured him, until things calmed down. Olivia, ever the optimist, brightened immediately. Is it like a vacation? Does it have trees? Can we climb them? Joseph found himself smiling despite the circumstances. Yes to all three, and there's a lake for fishing if you'd like to learn. I already know how, Noah stated quietly. A man at the shelter taught me last year. Another revelation that silenced Joseph. His son learning to fish from strangers at a homeless shelter while he closed million-dollar deals in his penthouse office. Within hours, Joseph had arranged everything. His trusted driver brought an SUV with tinted windows to the building's underground garage. Essential belongings were packed. His private security team created a diversion at the main entrance while the family slipped away unnoticed. The drive to the mountain retreat passed in relative silence, the twins eventually falling asleep in their booster seats. In the dim light of the dashboard, Joseph glanced occasionally at Jennifer in the passenger seat, trying to reconcile the poised, successful woman he'd married with this weathered survivor who had raised their children alone through hardship he could barely imagine. You're staring, she noted softly, not taking her eyes from the road ahead. I'm trying to understand, he admitted. How you survived it all. How you kept going. Jennifer's gaze drifted to the rearview mirror, where the sleeping twins were visible. I had no choice, they needed me. The cabin, though cabin hardly described the luxurious mountain home with its floor-to-ceiling windows and gourmet kitchen, stood on a wooded ridge overlooking a pristine lake. As they carried the sleeping children inside, Joseph realized this was the first time they would function as a family unit, however tentatively. The next morning brought sunshine and the twins' excited exploration of their temporary home. Joseph, awkward in jeans and a sweater rather than his customary suit, showed Noah how to bait a hook at the lake's edge. From the shore, Jennifer watched them, father and son, dark heads bent together in concentration, identical expressions of serious focus on their faces. Later, as Jennifer and Olivia prepared lunch in the kitchen, Joseph found himself chopping vegetables with unpracticed hands, listening to his daughter's non-stop commentary on everything from butterflies to her favorite cartoon characters. For the first time since Jennifer's reappearance, the weight on his chest seemed to lighten. Here, away from board meetings and business rivals and his mother's machinations, Joseph glimpsed what might have been, and perhaps what still could be. That evening, with the twins asleep upstairs, Joseph and Jennifer sat on the deck, the night, air cool around them, stars brilliant against the mountain sky. "I never stopped loving you," Jennifer said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence. "Even when I thought you'd moved on. Even when I hated you for it." Joseph didn't respond, but in the darkness, his hand found hers. The mountain retreat had become a sanctuary, insulating the newly reunited family from the media storm raging in the city. For 5 blissful days, Joseph had immersed himself in the unfamiliar role of father and husband. He'd taught Noah to fish, listened to Olivia's endless stories, and rediscovered the simple pleasure of Jennifer's company in quiet evening conversations on the deck. But reality intruded with a call from his CFO. An emergency board meeting had been scheduled in his absence. The Asian expansion, the project that would cement Blackwood Technologies as a global leader, was in jeopardy. "I have to go back," Joseph told Jennifer as they walked along the lakeshore, the twins skipping stones ahead of them. "Just for 2 days, 3 at most." Jennifer's expression remained neutral, but he caught the flicker of doubt in her eyes. "They're trying to force you out, aren't they?" "Richard Prescott has been making calls to key shareholders," Joseph admitted. "And my mother. Well, Eleanor Blackwood doesn't surrender easily." "What about Catherine?" Jennifer asked, voicing the question that had hung between them since their reunion. Joseph stopped walking, turning to face the woman who was still legally his wife. "Catherine was always more of a business arrangement than a relationship. My mother orchestrated it, the perfect merger of 2 powerful families." Jennifer nodded, unsurprised. "And now? Now I need to secure my position as CEO," Joseph said, watching the twins laughing by the water's edge. "Not for the power or the money, but because Blackwood Technologies represents their future, their inheritance." The drive back to the city felt like a regression. With each mile, Joseph felt himself hardening, the armor of CEO sliding back into place as he prepared for battle. By the time he reached Blackwood Tower, Joseph the father had been temporarily replaced by Joseph the corporate warrior. The boardroom fell silent as he entered, 13 faces turning toward him with expressions ranging from sympathy to barely concealed hostility. Richard Prescott occupied what had previously been Joseph's seat at the head of the table. Catherine sat beside her father, her elegant posture betraying no hint of the personal betrayal she undoubtedly felt. "Joseph," Richard greeted him with cold formality. "We weren't certain you would join us." "I'm still CEO of this company," Joseph replied evenly, remaining standing. "Though it appears some would prefer to forget that fact." Eleanor Blackwood sat opposite Catherine, her silver hair gleaming under the recessed lighting. "Joseph, we're concerned about the company's stability in this delicate time. The markets don't respond well to personal scandals, which is why I've arranged this." Joseph placed a tablet before each board member. "A statement from our PR team, explaining the situation accurately and sympathetically. The narrative of a family reunited after deception plays considerably better than endless speculation." He turned to address the entire board. "The Asian expansion requires stability, not uncertainty. I remain the most qualified person to lead this company through the next phase of growth." Richard Prescott's laugh was dismissive. "Qualified? You abandoned your post to play house in the mountains with a woman who may or may not be your supposedly dead wife. Meanwhile, our stock has dropped 12%. "A temporary fluctuation," Joseph countered. One that will correct itself when we proceed with the expansion as planned. Without the Prescott merger. Catherine spoke for the first time, her voice razor-sharp. Our backing was integral to securing the necessary financing. Joseph met her. Gazed directly. Alternatives have been arranged. Miyamoto Industries has expressed interest in a partnership that would actually offer better terms than what Prescott proposed. The stunned silence confirmed he had caught them off guard. Joseph had spent his evenings at the cabin making calls to Tokyo, leveraging relationships built over years. Richard Prescott's face flushed with anger. You would throw away our arrangement? After everything we've done for you? I believe it. Was a mutually beneficial business proposition, Joseph replied coolly. One that unfortunately can no longer proceed given that I am still legally married. Eleanor's voice cut through the tension. Which brings us to our proposal, Joseph. Choose your position as CEO or this family situation you've discovered. You cannot have both. The boardroom fell silent as Eleanor's ultimatum hung in the air. Every face turned to Joseph, waiting for his response. Even Catherine, despite her cool exterior, leaned forward slightly, her perfect manicure tapping against the polished table surface. Joseph looked at each board member in turn, these people who had been his closest allies during the years he'd believed himself a widower. How many of them had known the truth? How many had attended Jennifer's funeral while aware it was all fabrication? You're asking me to choose between my children and this company, Joseph said finally, his voice unnervingly calm. We're asking you to be realistic, Richard Prescott countered. Your personal drama is threatening shareholder value. The Asian expansion requires focused leadership, not someone distracted by domestic complications. Joseph straightened, buttoning his suit jacket in the gesture that had become his signature before delivering crucial decisions. I built this company from a regional player into a global force. After Jennifer's supposed death, I poured every waking hour into Blackwood Technologies because it was all I had left. He turned to face his mother directly. But I never would have chosen it over my family had I been given the choice. You made that decision for me, Mother. Eleanor's expression remained impassive, though her fingers tightened around her pen. I did what was necessary to secure the future of this family's legacy. No, Joseph replied, his tone hardening. You did what was necessary to control me, just as you're attempting to do now. He addressed the entire board once more. I've dedicated 5 years to this company at the expense of everything else. I missed the first steps of my children, their first words, their first days of school. I will not miss another moment. Catherine's laugh was brittle. So you're choosing this woman and her children over everything we've built together? Everything we planned? Our engagement was a business arrangement, Catherine. We both know that, Joseph replied, watching her carefully composed facade begin to crack. And yes, I'm choosing my family, but not over Blackwood Technologies. He placed a flash drive on the table. This contains evidence of multiple federal crimes committed by Eleanor Blackwood in orchestrating Jennifer's removal from the country and the falsification of her death certificate. Identity fraud, kidnapping, misuse of company funds. Eleanor's face drained of color as Joseph continued. It also contains documentation of improper collusion between Richard Prescott and 3 board members present today to artificially devalue Blackwood stock ahead of the proposed merger. Chaos erupted around the table. Richard Prescott rose to his feet shouting denials. 2 board members immediately began making calls to their attorneys. Catherine stared at Joseph with pure hatred. Joseph raised his hand, silencing the room through sheer force of presence. I have no desire to destroy this company or anyone in this room, so here is my counter-proposal. I remain CEO. The Asian expansion proceeds with Miyamoto as our partner, and my family is never threatened again. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. The board meeting is adjourned. I'll be taking a 2-week family leave effective immediately. I suggest you all use that time to consider your positions carefully. As the elevator descended to the lobby, Joseph loosened his tie and exhaled slowly. For the first time in 5 years, he felt like himself again. Not the cold, calculating businessman grief had forged, but the man Jennifer had fallen in love with at university. the man who had vowed to be a better father than his own had been. He pulled out his phone and dialed. "Jennifer, I'm coming home, for good this time." Joseph's return to the mountain cabin triggered an explosion of joy from Olivia, who launched herself into his arms the moment he stepped through the door. Noah hung back, watching carefully, his small face serious, until Joseph produced the model airplane from his briefcase, kept safe through board meetings and confrontations as promised. "You really came back," the boy said softly, accepting the plane with reverent hands. "I'll always come back," Joseph replied, the simple promise feeling more significant than any contract he'd ever signed. That evening, after the twins were asleep, Joseph and Jennifer sat on the cabin's deck beneath a canopy of stars, mugs of tea warming their hands against the mountain chill. "I resigned as CEO," Joseph said, breaking the comfortable silence. Jennifer turned to him, startled. "But the company, your legacy—" "I didn't resign completely," he clarified. "I'm stepping back to chairman of the board. I'll guide major decisions, but the day-to-day operations will be handled by someone else." He watched the moonlight reflect on the lake below. "I spent 5 years building an empire to fill the void you left. Now I have a chance to build something more important." "What about your mother, the Prescotts?" Jennifer asked, concern etching her features. "Eleanor has agreed to retire to her estate in Europe. The evidence I gathered was persuasive." Joseph's mouth tightened. "As for the Prescotts, they've withdrawn their opposition to the Miyamoto partnership. Apparently, Richard values his reputation too much to risk exposure." Jennifer's hand found his in the darkness. "And Catherine?" Joseph sighed. "She's taken it harder. There will be social repercussions, gossip, but she'll survive. The Prescott name still carries weight." The night wrapped around them, peaceful and vast. After a moment, Joseph spoke again. "Tomorrow, I'd like to take Noah and Olivia to see their grandfather's study." Jennifer looked puzzled. "Your father's been gone for 10 years. "Yes," Joseph nodded. "But his legacy is more than just the company. There are things in his private papers, things I discovered while preparing to confront Eleanor, that might help the twins understand where they come from." He turned to face Jennifer fully. "And I want to know everything about the last 5 years. Every first step, first word, every triumph and struggle. I've missed so much, Jennifer. I want to at least know what I missed." Under the vast mountain sky, surrounded by wilderness instead of skyscrapers, Joseph Blackwood began to rebuild not just his family, but himself. The Blackwood family mansion stood like a fortress on the city's outskirts, its imposing stone facade and manicured gardens a testament to generations of wealth and power. Today, however, Joseph approached it not as heir to a dynasty, but as a father determined to reclaim his children's birthright. "This is where you grew up?" Olivia asked, her small hand gripping his tightly as they walked up the sweeping driveway. Noah followed closely behind, his eyes taking in every detail with the quiet assessment that reminded Joseph so much of himself. "It is," Joseph confirmed, "and before that my father and his father before him." The grand foyer echoed with their footsteps as Joseph led the twins and Jennifer past priceless artwork and antiques. Staff members watched with barely concealed curiosity. The infamous Mrs. Blackwood, returned from the dead, and the children no one knew existed. Joseph brought them to his father's study, a room that had remained largely untouched since William Blackwood's death a decade ago. Heavy curtains were drawn back to reveal floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive oak desk, and walls covered with maps and photographs chronicling the Blackwood legacy. "Your grandfather believed that wealth meant responsibility," Joseph explained, kneeling between the twins. "He built hospitals, funded schools, created opportunities for thousands of people." "Like a superhero?" Olivia asked, eyes wide. Joseph smiled. "In some ways. He wasn't perfect, but he tried to make the world better." Noah approached a framed photograph on the desk, a younger William Blackwood with a small boy on his shoulders. "Is that you?" "It is," Joseph confirmed. "One of the few times he took me fishing instead of to board meetings." Jennifer watched from the doorway, her expression a mixture of wonder and concern. This world of privilege had once rejected her brutally. Now her children were being welcomed into it. Later, as they explored the grounds, Joseph received a call from his newly appointed CEO. The Asian expansion was proceeding smoothly, stock prices were recovering, and the board had unanimously approved Joseph's proposal for a new charitable foundation focused on reuniting separated families. The Blackwood Renaissance Foundation, Joseph explained to Jennifer after ending the call. Something good should come from what happened to us. As evening fell, Joseph gathered his family in the garden where he and Jennifer had once been married. The twins chased fireflies while their parents watched from a stone bench. "Are you sure about this?" Jennifer asked softly. "Leaving the company to others after you worked so hard building it?" Joseph's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. "I'm building something more important now." In the fading light, surrounded by the legacy of his ancestors and the promise of his children's future, Joseph Blackwood finally understood what true wealth meant. The winter snow fell softly outside the windows of the Blackwood mansion as Joseph adjusted his tie. In the bedroom mirror, his reflection showed a man transformed, the hard edges of the corporate titan now softened, worry lines around his eyes replaced by laugh lines. 6 months had passed since Jennifer's return, and though challenges remained, they had established a tentative peace and routine. "Are you nervous?" Jennifer asked, appearing in the doorway. She wore a simple blue dress that brought out the warmth in her eyes. "It's just dinner," Joseph replied, though they both knew it was more than that. Tonight marked their first official date since her return, a deliberate step toward rebuilding their relationship, not just as co-parents, but as the couple they once were. "The twins are excited about their sleepover with Mrs. Hanson," Jennifer said, referring to the kind-hearted housekeeper who had become the children's favorite confidant. Noah packed 3 books, and Olivia insisted on bringing Mr. Whiskers. The stuffed cat had been Joseph's gift on their first weekend at the mansion. The restaurant Joseph had chosen was neither ostentatious nor the type to alert paparazzi. In a private corner booth, they ordered wine and reminisced about their college days, Jennifer's art exhibitions, Joseph's business competition victories, and the autumn afternoon they'd first met in the university library. "You were so serious," Jennifer recalled, her eyes softening with the memory. "Surrounded by business journals looking like the weight of the world was on your shoulders. And you were sketching people instead of studying for your art history exam," Joseph countered, smiling. "You said my frown was architecturally interesting." Their laughter came easily, the years of separation momentarily suspended. When Jennifer reached for her glass, her fingers brushed against Joseph's and neither pulled away. The drive home was quiet, a comfortable silence rather than the tense one that had characterized their early reunion. As they approached the mansion, snow falling in the headlights, Joseph found himself reaching for Jennifer's hand. "I'd like to do this again," he said simply. "I'd like that too," she replied, her smile reflecting in the window. At home, they found a surprise waiting. The twins had created drawings for them before leaving for their sleepover. Noah's meticulous artwork showed 4 stick figures in front of a large house. Olivia's more exuberant creation featured the same family, surrounded by hearts and stars. "When are you going to get married again?" Olivia had written across the top. In her uneven handwriting, Joseph and Jennifer exchanged glances, momentarily flustered by the innocent question. "We should get some rest," Jennifer said, turning toward the guest wing where she still maintained separate quarters. "Jennifer," Joseph called softly as she reached the stairs. When she turned, he found himself at a loss for words. Instead, he crossed the space between them and gently took her hand. No grand gestures, no dramatic declarations, just the simple touch they had both denied themselves for far too long. The courtroom was silent as Eleanor Blackwood stood to receive her sentence. At 72, her once imposing figure seemed diminished in the harsh fluorescent lighting. Joseph sat in the front row, his expression unreadable as the judge delivered the verdict. 2 years of house arrest, substantial financial penalties, and mandatory community service. A lenient sentence, Joseph's attorney whispered. Given the severity of the charges, Joseph nodded, feeling neither victory nor vindication. The public exposure of Eleanor's crimes had tarnished the Blackwood name more than any business setback ever could. Yet he knew this closure was necessary, not for revenge, but for healing. As the court adjourned, Eleanor approached him, escorted by her attorney. Her eyes, so like his own, held something he'd rarely seen there: uncertainty. "I'd like to see them," she said quietly. "The children. My grandchildren." Joseph had anticipated this request. He and Jennifer had spent many nights discussing it, weighing the risks against the possibility of redemption, even for someone like Eleanor. Under supervision, Joseph replied evenly, "And only if they wish to meet you." The meeting took place the following week in the garden of the Blackwood mansion. Eleanor, stripped of her usual armor of designer clothes and perfect composure, sat nervously on a stone bench as Noah and Olivia approached with their parents. "Children," Joseph began carefully, "this is your grandmother, Eleanor." Olivia, ever fearless, stepped forward first. "Why did you take Mommy away?" The blunt question from a 6-year-old accomplished what years of business adversaries had failed to do. It cracked Eleanor Blackwood's facade completely. For perhaps the first time in her adult life, she answered with unvarnished truth. "I was afraid," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "Afraid your mother would take your father away from me, from our family legacy." Noah, watching with his penetrating gaze, asked, "Are you still afraid?" Eleanor looked at the boy who so resembled her son at that age. "No," she said after a moment, "just sorry." Later that evening, after the children had gone to bed, Joseph sat with Jennifer in the library discussing the day's events. "Do you think she can change?" Jennifer asked. "Truly?" Joseph considered the question carefully. "I think even the hardest hearts can soften when faced with what they've lost." He reached for her hand. "I've changed, haven't I?" Jennifer's smile was gentle as her fingers intertwined with his. "You've remembered who you always were beneath the armor." Outside their window, the first green shoots of spring pushed through. The soil, new life emerging from winter's hardship, fragile but determined. 1 year after their unexpected reunion in the park, Joseph and Jennifer stood hand in hand under a floral arch in the garden of their new home. The property, nestled between the city and mountains, represented their fresh start, neither the imposing Blackwood mansion nor the modest apartment, but something that was uniquely theirs. Noah and Olivia, now 6 years old and dressed in carefully chosen formal attire, watched with wide eyes as their parents prepared to renew the vows that had never truly been broken. Noah carried a small velvet pillow with 2 gleaming rings, his usual serious expression softened by the significance of the moment. Olivia clutched a basket of flower petals, barely containing her excitement as she bounced slightly on her toes. The intimate gathering included only their closest friends and family. In the front row sat Mrs. Hanson, the housekeeper who had become like a grandmother to the twins. Behind her, Catherine Prescott, her initial hostility transformed into a tentative respect after months of witnessing Joseph's transformation from corporate titan to devoted father. At the back, under the watchful eye of her court-appointed supervisor, sat Eleanor Blackwood. Her house arrest allowed for this special dispensation, though the electronic monitor on her ankle was visible beneath her designer pantsuit. The past year had aged her visibly, yet there was something new in her expression as she watched her grandchildren, a softness that suggested the first tentative steps toward redemption. Joseph, looking at Jennifer in her simple white dress, felt a wave of emotion so powerful it momentarily stole his breath. This woman had endured poverty, hardship, and heartbreak, raising their children alone while believing he had abandoned them. Yet here she stood, her eyes filled not with bitterness but with the same love he had fallen for over a decade ago. "When we first met," Joseph began his vows, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes, "I thought I knew exactly what my life would be. You showed me a different path, one with color, with passion, with purpose beyond profit. Then I lost you, and I became a man I hardly recognized. He squeezed her hands gently. But fate gave us what few ever receive, a second chance. These past 12 months have taught me that no success is meaningful without someone to share it with, that no amount of wealth can purchase a single moment of true happiness like watching our children grow. Jennifer's vows, spoken through tears of joy, celebrated not just their love, but the resilience that had carried them through their darkest hours. "We've crossed oceans of sorrow to find each other again," she said. "And I promise to never lose sight of the shore we've finally reached together." As they exchanged rings, Olivia could contain herself no longer. "Does this mean we're a real family now?" she asked loudly, causing laughter to ripple through the guests. "We've always been a real family," Joseph answered, kneeling to his daughter's level. "This just makes it official." Under a perfect blue sky, surrounded by those who had witnessed both their separation and reunion, Joseph and Jennifer sealed their renewed commitment with a kiss. Not the passionate embrace of young lovers, but the profound connection of two souls who had found their way back to each other against impossible odds. Later, as music played and their guests celebrated, Joseph watched Jennifer dance with the twins beneath strings of garden lights. The sight filled his heart with a joy so complete it bordered on pain. 5 years lost, but a lifetime still ahead. A future bright with possibility and rich with love. The Blackwood family story, once marked by tragedy and deception, had been rewritten. Not erased, for the scars remained, but transformed into a testament to the enduring power of love, forgiveness, and second chances.